I'd never imagined it would happen to me. Not in a million years. Everyone always says it's just a horror story. Something you hear around campfires or in dimly lit bars out of gas in the middle of nowhere. It sounds like a setup for a ghost tale, or some psycho with a chainsaw. But when it happens to you, it's not a story. It's real. It's the kind of terror that leaves you breathless, frozen in place. It started like any other road trip. I had just left Atlanta heading toward the coast. For some time to clear my head, I was alone, just the open road and my car. The kind of solitude that feels comforting at first. No noise, no distractions, just me and the horizon. The radio was playing softly, and I was lost in my thoughts when I saw the first sign. Next, gas station 50 mi. I didn't think much of it. I had a full tank. What could go wrong? The miles passed by slowly. The landscape outside changed from dense woods to barren fields. My gas gauge ticked down ever so slightly. Still, I didn't think about it. I didn't even glance at the gauge. The world outside was beautiful, quiet. Then something strange happened. I glanced at the road ahead and it felt wrong. The sky seemed darker than it should have been. I checked the time on my phone. No clouds in sight, no thunderstorms yet. The air had a certain heaviness to it. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath. A slight chill swept through the car, though the windows were up, and I felt a sharp jolt of unease. Told myself it was just my imagination. I was alone in unfamiliar territory. But then my car started to sputter. The engine coughed, and for a moment I thought I was imagining it. But no, it happened again, followed by a loud churning sound. The gaslight flickered, on its yellow glow piercing the dimming world outside. Seriously, I muttered under my breath. I checked the fuel gauge, empty, panic setting. How could this happen? There had been no sign of a gas station for miles. I pulled over to the side of the road, heart hammering in my chest. My phone, of course, had no service. The barren landscape was all around me. No cars, no houses, nothing but the endless stretch of road. I opened the door, the cold air rushing in, and stepped outside. The silence was profound, almost suffocating. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. I checked the trunk for any spare gas, but there was nothing. No jerry can, no backup plan, nothing. I slammed the trunk shut, cursing under my breath. I had no choice but to walk. I began the long trek down the road, hoping to find some kind of help. But with each step, the world around me seemed more and more alien. Minutes stretched into hours. The sun had disappeared, leaving only a vague twilight glow, a colorless wash of gray across the horizon. I didn't know where I was or which way I was walking. There was no sign of a gas station, no house, no car in sight, only the road. I had no choice but to keep walking. As I walked, I started to hear something. At first it was faint, a distant hum, barely audible, like the sound of an engine, but it grew louder. The noise seemed to be coming from all around me, as though the earth itself was humming. The sound was low, steady, and deep, and it set my teeth on edge. I turned around, half expecting to see a car approaching. But the road was empty. There was nothing behind me, just the endless stretch of asphalt, and the weight of the silence pressing down. The sound kept getting louder. My heartbeat quickened, and I felt an inexplicable dread creep over me. My legs felt heavy, as though the very ground was pulling me down. I forced myself to keep moving, telling myself that it was just my nerves. But the sound wasn't just a hum now. It was a pulse, a rhythmic thumping, that seemed to vibrate in my chest. I stumbled, my eyes darting around in a panic. That's when I saw it, a figure standing in the distance. It was tall, too tall and far too still. I couldn't make out details at first. It might be a tree or some kind of shadow, but no, it was a person. At least it looked like a person. The figure was standing at the edge of the road, unmoving, just watching me. My breath caught in my throat. I stood there, frozen, my mind trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Why was there someone out here so far from civilization? Why were they standing so still in the middle of nowhere? Then the figure started moving slowly at first, but then faster, closing the distance between us. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, like it was gliding rather than walking. I couldn't see its face, only the outline of its body, tall, thin, with long, spindly limbs. My stomach twisted. I turned and ran, my legs pumping harder than I ever thought possible. the sound behind me. The pulse, the hum, it grew louder, now a deafening roar. The figure was gaining on me. I could feel it, even though I didn't dare look back. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs gave out beneath me, and I collapsed onto the ground. I couldn't catch my breath. The sound was deafening now. It was everywhere, all around me. When I looked up, the figure was standing over me. Its face, I couldn't describe it. It wasn't human, not really. It was like a mask of nothingness, shifting, swirling, an abyss that seemed to pull the light out of the world. I stared into it frozen, and then just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. The noise stopped. The figure was no longer there. I was left alone on the road, gasping for air to have, trembling uncontrollably. I didn't know how long I stayed there, but when I finally managed to get up, I found my car. It was right there on the side of the road. The gas light was still on, but the car itself was running as if nothing had happened. I climbed in, still shaking my hands, clutching the steering wheel as if it were the only thing keeping me grounded. I never did find the gas station, but I made it home somehow. I couldn't explain what had happened, what I had seen, what had been chasing me. All I knew was that the world had shifted in a way that defied reason, and I will never ever forget that hum. The hum that seemed to come from the earth itself. The hum that still lingers in the silence of my mind. The Backroads G gas station. I found myself driving through the desolate back roads of West Virginia. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving a blanket of darkness that seemed to swallow everything. My gas gauge hovered perilously close to empty, and I cursed myself for not filling up earlier. The winding road was flanked by dense woods, and the occasional flicker of a distant light only added to my unease. As I rounded a bend, I spotted an old gas station illuminated by a flickering neon sign that read "Open It." Looked like it hadn't seen business in years, but desperation drove me to pull in the gravel crunched beneath my tires as I parked next to the rusted pumps. The place had an eerie charm, weathered wood-peeling paint, and an old diner attached that looked like. I stepped out of my car and was immediately hit by the chill in the air. The wind whispered through the trees, sending shivers down my spine. As I approached the pumps, I noticed they were covered in cobwebs and grime. A sense of foreboding washed over me. Something felt off about this place. I walked toward the entrance of the station, pushing open. The creaky door inside was dimly lit and filled with dusty shelves lined with outdated snacks and expired drinks. An old radio played softly in the background, crackling with static, as if trying to communicate something important. "Hello," I called out hesitantly. No response. I moved deeper into the store, glancing around nervously. A bell jingled above me as I stepped further inside, but still no one appeared. My heart raced as I approached the counter where an ancient cash register sat, its keys yellowed with age. Suddenly, from behind a door marked "Employees," only a figure emerged. A gaunt man with hollow cheeks and wild hair that seemed to defy gravity. He wore a stained apron that looked like it hadn't been washed in years. "Need some help?" he asked, in a voice that sent chills down my spine. Yeah," I stammered. "I need gas." He nodded slowly and shuffled toward me, his movements jerky and unnatural. "We don't get many visitors here," he said with an unsettling grin that revealed crooked teeth. I can see why, I muttered under my breath as he led me outside to one of the pumps. As he fumbled with the nozzle, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The man's eyes darted around nervously, as if he were expecting someone or something to appear at any moment. "Do you have any other customers?" I asked casually while trying to gauge his reaction. He chuckled softly, but didn't answer directly. Instead, he leaned closer and whispered conspiratorially, "They don't come here anymore." Not since. His voice trailed off ominously. "What do you mean?" My curiosity piqued. Despite my better judgment, he glanced over his shoulder before continuing in a hushed tone, "The last guy who stopped by. Well, let's just say he didn't leave." A cold sweat broke out on my forehead as dread settled deep within me. "What happened?" The man's smile widened unnaturally as he replied cryptically, "You'll find out soon enough." Just then there was a loud bang from inside the station, a sound like metal clanging against metal, followed by what sounded like muffled voices arguing fiercely. My heart raced. Every instinct screamed at me to leave this place immediately. "I think I should go," I said abruptly as panic surged through me, but before I could turn away, he grabbed my arm with surprising strength for someone so frail looking. "You can't leave yet, you haven't paid." His grip tightened painfully around my wrist, and I winced in pain. "I'll pay, just let go," I shouted, trying to pry myself free. He loosened his grip slightly, but didn't release me. "You're not leaving until you pay what's owed," he said, his voice now low and menacing. Before I could respond, the muffled voices from Ines' side grew louder, and the arguing turned into a cacophony of shouts. The man's head snapped toward the station, his expression twisting into one of panic. "They're coming," he muttered under his breath, releasing my arm. "Who's coming?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. Instead, he sprinted back toward the station, leaving me alone by the pump. I didn't wait to find out what he meant. I jumped into my car, my hands shaking. As I turned the key in the ignition, the engine sputtered but didn't start. Come on, come on, come on," I pleaded. Turning the key again, the engine roared to life, just as the station's front door burst open and shadows spilled out like a living tide. I didn't look back as I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, sending gravel flying as I sped down the road in my rearview mirror. The flickering neon sign of the gas station into the darkness. But even as I put miles between myself and that cursed place, the man's final words echoed in my mind. "You'll find out soon enough." The countryside had always held a certain allure, an invitation to solitude, and freedom that promised a quiet respite from the chaos of everyday life. On that warm summer evening, I welcomed it with open arms, seeking solace in the endless stretches of road and the fading light of the sun, the vibrant colors of the sky painted with shades of orange and purple were the perfect backdrop for the peaceful journey I envisioned. But as the miles passed beneath my tires, I unknowingly ventured into something far darker than I could have imagined. I was lost in the beauty of the evening, the winding roads and the lush hills. When the purr of my car's engine shifted, it sputtered once, twice, and then began to cough, a sound so out of place it made my heart race. Glancing down at the gas gauge, I saw the flickering warning. Panic surged through me as I realized how dangerously close to empty I had allowed myself to get. But I tried to reassure myself there had to be a station not far ahead. Surely I could make it. The engine wheezed and came to a final halt. Silence fell over the scene like a heavy blanket. The air felt thicker, almost suffocating. And for a moment I sat in the car, staring at the road stretching endlessly before me, unsure of what to do next. Outside, the dusk deepened into night, the world around me slowly disappearing into a veil of shadows. My phone, of course, had no signal. I could almost laugh at the cruel irony of it. But there was no humor in the situation. The nearest town, if I recalled correctly, was miles behind me too. Far to walk, but my options were limited. Grabbing my flashlight, I stepped out of the car, the chill of the evening air brushing against my skin. The shadows seemed to grow, as though watching me with intent. There was an unnatural stillness, as if and the earth themselves were waiting for something. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the rising dread crawling up my spine, and set out along the road, the beam of my flashlight barely cutting through the darkness ahead. The gravel crunched beneath my feet. With every step, each noise magnified in the oppressive quiet. My flashlight caught fleeting glimpses of movement, shadows shifting just outside the circle of light. But when I turned to look, nothing was there. The night felt alive, and I was a stranger in its midst. I quickened my pace, hoping for any sign of civilization, until I finally saw it, a faint light in the distance. A house nestled at the end of a long winding driveway stood like a beacon against the darkened backdrop. Its windows glowed with a soft, welcoming light, and for a moment hope surged in my chest. It could be my salvation, a safe haven from the oppressive night. I walked toward it, eager to reach it. But as I drew closer, something felt wrong. The yard was wild weeds choking the path to the front door. The house itself, though lit, looked ancient, its paint peeling and the frame sagging with age. It was as though it had been forgotten by time, left to decay in this remote stretch of land. I hesitated before knocking, my instincts screaming at me to turn and leave, but the pull of desperation was too strong. My knuckles rapped against the door, the sound echoing in the stillness for a moment. There was no answer. Then, with a slow, deliberate creak, the door opened. An elderly man stood there. His features, obscured by the shadows spilling from within his eyes, glinted in the low light, and though he smiled, there was something unnerving in the way his lips curved, something unsettling in his expression. His presence seemed to fill the space, a weight that made the air feel heavier. "Lost, are we?" he asked, his voice rasping like dried leaves. I nodded, my throat dry. My car ran out of gas. "I was hoping you were hoping for dark, yes." He interrupted, his voice low, and knowing, he stepped aside and without another word motioned for me to enter. I stepped into the house, my skin prickling with unease. The interior was dimly lit, the walls lined with old photographs, family portraits that seemed to watch me as I moved. The air was thick with dust, the smell of mildew, and something older, more stagnant. I felt as though I had crossed some invisible boundary, and now there was no turning back. "Make yourself at home," the man said. Gesturing to a tattered couch, I lowered myself onto it, trying to ignore the way the cushions seemed to sag under my weight, as though the house itself was tired, weighed down by years of secrets. The man shuffled to the kitchen, his movements slow and deliberate. "Would you like some tea, a bite to eat?" he asked, his voice faintly mocking. "I'm fine, thank you," I replied, my discomfort growing by the second. I wanted to leave, but the door was now just a memory, Before I could make any attempt to gather my thoughts, he returned with a steaming cup in hand. "You must be weary here, drink this," he said, his eyes gleaming with something I couldn't place. "It'll do you good," despite every instinct telling me to refuse. I took the cup, my fingers trembling as I held it. The warmth seeped through my hands, and I brought it to my lips, barely tasting the liquid. It was thick, heavier than tea should be, and something in its scent made my stomach churn. I lowered the cup quickly. He leaned in, his eyes never leaving mine. "Now tell me, what do you fear most?" His words hung in the air, thick with menace. For a moment I was paralyzed, unable to respond. The house seemed to close in around me, the shadows deepening, stretching as if alive. The walls whispered, and I realized with growing horror that this was no mere question. It was a trap. I should really go. I stammered, my voice shaking, but the man's smile widened, and his grip when it came was cold and firm. "And missed the opportunity to confront your deepest fears. You're not leaving yet." Panic exploded in my chest. I bolted from the couch, but his bony hand shot out, grabbing my arm with unnatural strength. "Stay with me, the night is still young, and the stories have only just begun." With every ounce of strength I wrenched free from his grasp and dashed for the door, my pulse thundering in my ears. His laughter followed me, sharp and jagged, as I fled into the night. I didn't look back, not until I reached my car. My fingers fumbled for the keys, and when the engine finally roared to life, I sped away, tires screeching on the gravel road. The house receded into the distance, but the memory of the man's twisted smile and the darkness that surrounded him lingered. As I drove through the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the old man was still watching, still waiting, and somewhere in the forgotten corners of that desolate road he was smiling. 17 now playing 3 disturbing.